Darkness. Suffocating, absolute darkness. Then a gasp. Sure. Desperate. A woman's hands clawed at her face, fingers scraping against fabric pressed tight over her mouth and nose. The cloth reeked of something chemical, something wrong. Her chest burned. Lungs screaming. She thrashed against the weight holding her down, but her limbs felt distant, heavy, like they belonged to someone else. I can't breathe. The words came out muffled, strangled. Please? I can't. Her vision blurred at the edges, darkening further. Was this how it ended? In the dark, alone, unable to even scream? Then, hands. Different hands. Ripping the cloth away. Air rushed in, cold and sharp. She gasped, coughing, tears streaming down her face. And when her eyes finally focused on what lay in those hands, on the cloth now dangling between gloved fingers, her heart stopped. Not from lack of oxygen this time. From pure, soul-crushing horror. Her mouth opened but no sound came out. Only the terrible, silent scream of someone whose entire world had just shattered. The image froze. Her face locked in that moment of devastating realization. What she saw beneath that cloth destroyed everything she thought she knew. But to understand that moment, to understand how a single piece of fabric could unravel a woman's entire life, we need to go back 3 months. Back to when Celeste Monroe still believed the worst was already behind her. You're probably wondering what could be so terrifying. Stay close. This story will shake you. The alarm screamed at 4 a.m., but Celeste was already awake. She'd been awake for an hour, staring at the water-stained ceiling of her cramped bedroom, listening to her father shuffle to the bathroom for the 3rd time that night. Ray's footsteps were uneven, confused. Sometimes he forgot where he was going halfway there. Cece, everyone called her Cece, pushed herself out of bed, her body aching from yesterday's 3 shifts. Diner in the morning, hotel housekeeping in the afternoon, janitorial work at night. 72 hours a week and it still wasn't enough. Not for rent. Not for Ray's medications. Not for Lily's school supplies. Not for a lawyer who might actually believe her. She moved through the dark apartment on muscle memory, checking Ray's room first. He was back in bed, tangled in his sheets, mumbling something about a fire truck. Cece gently straightened his blankets, kissed his weathered forehead. Sleep, Dad, she whispered. No fires tonight. Then Lily's room. Her daughter lay curled around a stuffed rabbit, 7 years old and still believing the world was fundamentally good. Cece's chest tightened. How much longer could she protect that innocence? She allowed herself 30 seconds to watch Lily sleep. 30 seconds to remember what it felt like to breathe without the weight of shame pressing down on her lungs. Then she went to make coffee. The mirror in the bathroom told the truth her words never could. Dark circles carved deep beneath her eyes. Skin pale and drawn. Hair that hadn't seen a decent cut in 8 months, pulled back in a perpetual, severe bun. She looked hollowed out. Haunted. She looked exactly like what she was. A woman still drowning 6 months after the verdict. The flashback hit without warning. She was in scrubs, laughing with Natasha over coffee in the hospital break room. Patient in room 412 was doing better. The gunshot wound victim in ICU was stable. It was a good day. A day when Cece Monroe, RN, believed she made a difference. Then the image shattered. Courtroom. Fluorescent lights. The judge's voice, cold and final. Gross negligence resulting in patient death. Your medical license is hereby revoked. The media outside, cameras flashing, microphones thrust in her face. Headlines scrolling across her vision. Nurse kills patient. Medical mistake proves fatal. Monroe, from healer to killer. She tried to explain. Tried to tell them she wasn't even on shift that night. That someone had falsified the medication logs. That she would never, could never. But no one listened. No one ever listened to the disgraced nurse. Cece gripped the edge of the sink, forcing herself back to the present. The coffee. She needed coffee. By 5:30 a.m. she was at Rosie's diner, tying on a grease-stained apron that smelled like yesterday's bacon. The morning rush hadn't started yet, just a handful of truckers and insomniacs nursing their own demons over scrambled eggs. Table 4 needs a refill, Rosie called from the kitchen, her raspy smoker's voice somehow comforting in its familiarity. Cece grabbed the coffee pot and made her rounds, moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd been a caretaker her entire life. Smile. Pour. Move on. Don't make eye contact long enough for them to ask questions. But at table 6, a middle-aged woman in a business suit looked up from her phone, and recognition flashed across her face. Oh my God, the woman said loud enough that the entire diner could hear. You're her. That nurse. The one who killed that man. The coffee pot trembled in Cecil's hand. Cecil's voice came out smaller than she wanted. I'm just trying to work, ma'am. Unbelievable. The woman stood, grabbed her purse. I'm eating breakfast served by a murderer. Rosie, you should be ashamed hiring someone like her. The diner went silent. Everyone stared. Cece felt her eyes burning, but she refused to let the tears fall. Not here. Not in front of these people who'd already decided she was guilty. That's enough, Patricia, Rosie said, stepping out from the kitchen, spatula in hand like a weapon. Cecil's one of my best workers. You got a problem with that? There's the door. Patricia left. But not before giving Cece one last look of pure disgust. The tears came later in the diner's bathroom. Silent. Efficient. 3 minutes to fall apart, then back to work. That was all she could afford. Have you ever been blamed for something you didn't do? That helpless rage when no one believes your truth? Drop a comment if you felt this kind of pain. Because Cece felt it every single day, and it was slowly killing her. Across the city, in a mansion that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime, Donovan Ashford stood at his mother's bedside and felt absolutely powerless. Eleanor Ashford looked small against the medical-grade pillows, her usually vibrant face waxen and drawn. The private nurse had left minutes ago, and now it was just Van, his mother, and the beeping monitors that tracked her every breath. 2 weeks since the incident at St. Mercy Hospital. 2 weeks since someone had nearly killed her with a medication error that the hospital was calling unfortunate and under investigation. Van called it attempted murder. Donovan. Eleanor's voice was barely a whisper. Stop hovering. You're making me nervous. You should be nervous. Van's jaw tightened. Someone tried to kill you, Mother? It was a mistake. It wasn't a mistake. Van turned away, unable to look at her weakened state. He was 38 years old, a self-made billionaire who'd built a pharmaceutical empire from nothing. He controlled boardrooms, crushed competitors, made grown men tremble with a single word. But he couldn't control this. Couldn't protect the one person who'd actually loved him unconditionally. The helplessness felt like drowning. Your father is worried about you, Eleanor said softly. You haven't slept in days. I'll sleep when I find out who did this. And then what? You'll throw money at it? Sue them? Buy the entire hospital? If I have to. Van's voice was cold. Controlled. The tone that made investors nervous and board members compliant. But Eleanor knew him better. She saw through the ice to the terrified boy underneath, the one who'd watched his little sister die on an operating table 15 years ago because a nurse had mixed up medications. The one who'd never forgiven himself for not being there when it mattered. Van. The bedroom door opened. Gerald Ashford entered, his salt and pepper hair disheveled, reading glasses perched on his nose. Where Van was all sharp angles and cold fury, Gerald was warm, grounded. The kind of billionaire who still remembered where he came from. Son, Gerald said quietly. Can we talk? Van followed his father into the hallway, closing Eleanor's door behind them. She needs rest, Gerald began. Not your anger. Someone almost killed her, Dad. What do you want me to do? Send flowers and move on? I want you to remember she needs love right now. Not a vigilante crusade. Gerald's eyes were sad, knowing. I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But turning into a weapon won't help her heal. Van's hands clenched into fists. I'm going to find out who did this. And what if it really was just a terrible mistake? It wasn't. Van pulled out his phone, swiped to a photo. The hospital tried to bury the report. But I have friends. I found out who was supposed to be my mother's nurse that night. He turned the screen toward his father. A woman's face stared back. Tired eyes. Sharp cheekbones. A hospital ID badge that read, Celeste Monroe, RN. Her, Van said, and there was something dark in his voice. Something dangerous. Celeste Monroe. She was fired 6 months ago for killing a patient. Gross negligence. And somehow she was in that hospital the night my mother coded. Gerald frowned. If she was fired. That's what I'm going to find out. Van's smile was cold. Sure. Because Celeste Monroe is either the unluckiest nurse in America, or she's a murderer who's still walking free. What would you do if someone hurt the person you loved most? Would you seek justice or would you seek revenge? And would you know the difference? Van didn't care about the difference. He only cared about the truth. And he was going to find it, no matter who he had to destroy along the way. The Grandeur Hotel rose 43 stories above downtown, all glass and marble and the kind of luxury that made Cece's teeth ache. She pushed her housekeeping cart down the penthouse-level hallway, her shoulders burning from the weight of fresh linens and industrial-strength cleaning supplies. This was her second shift of the day. 4 hours until she had to pick up Lily from after-school care, then home to make dinner, then out again for the overnight janitorial job at an office building on 5th. Sleep would come sometime around 2 a.m. Maybe. The cart's wheel squeaked, a rhythmic sound that echoed off the expensive wallpaper. Room 4201, 4202, 4203. The penthouse suite was 4,205. A permanent residence, according to the staff schedule. Some billionaire who owned half the city and tipped like he resented every dollar. Cece had cleaned it twice before. She knew the routine. Quick, efficient, invisible. That's what rich people wanted from their help. Ghosts who made their lives pristine without reminding them that real people did the work. She was good at being invisible now. The cart hit a loose section of carpet and Cece stumbled. Her hand shot out to catch herself, but instead knocked over the spray bottles. They clattered to the marble floor, loud as gunshots in the quiet hallway. "Damn it," Cece hissed, dropping to her knees to gather them. The penthouse door flew open. A man stood in the doorway, all sharp suit and sharper eyes, dark hair immaculately styled despite the early hour. He looked like money. Looked like power. Looked furious at the interruption. "Do you have any idea what time it is?" His voice was cold. Precise. "I'm on a conference call with Tokyo." "I'm so sorry, sir, Cece looked up and the words died in her throat. Because he was staring at her. Not with general annoyance but with specific, focused intensity. Recognition dawned across his face like a slow-motion car crash. "You," he said, and there was something deadly in his tone. Cece's heart stuttered. She didn't know this man. Had never seen him before in her life. So why was he looking at her like she'd murdered his family? Cece stood, backing away. "I should go. You're Celeste Monroe." Not a question. A certainty. Ice flooded Cece's veins. "I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me." He stepped into the hallway and Cece saw it then. The files in his hand, papers covered in highlighted text and printed photographs. Her face. Her hospital badge. Her mugshot from the trial. "Oh God. You were my mother's nurse," the man continued, each word precise and cutting. "6 months ago you killed a patient through negligence. You lost your license. And 2 weeks ago, you were at St. Mercy Hospital the same night someone tried to kill my mother." "No." Cece shook her head, panic rising. "No, I wasn't there. I haven't been in that hospital since. I have security footage." The lie hit Cece like a physical blow. Because she had been there. Van had somehow gotten her hired as a janitor just last week, but this man couldn't know that yet. Unless. "Who are you?" Cece whispered. "Donovan Ashford. And I'm going to prove you tried to kill my mother." Cece ran. She didn't think, didn't plan, just grabbed her cart and shoved it between them, then bolted for the service elevator. Behind her, she heard Ashford curse, heard his footsteps pounding after her. The elevator doors opened. Cece threw herself inside, jabbing the lobby button with shaking fingers. Ashford's hand shot between the closing doors. They stood there, trapped together in 8 feet of enclosed space, and Cece felt the walls closing in. This was it. This was where her already destroyed life finally ended completely. "Please," Cece heard herself say. "Please, I didn't do anything. I've never even met your mother." "Then why did you run?" Ashford's eyes were cold. Merciless. "Because no one ever believes me." The words exploded out of Cece, months of pain and rage and helplessness finally breaking through. "Because I lost everything for something I didn't do and I can't lose anything else. There's nothing left to take." Something flickered across Ashford's face. Something that might have been doubt. But then his expression hardened again. "The parking garage. We're going to talk. And if you run again, I promise you'll regret it." Did Cece do it? Could this exhausted, desperate woman be capable of murder? The answer seemed obvious. But then again, the truth always does, until it doesn't. The parking garage was concrete and shadows and the faint smell of gasoline. Cece stood with her back against a pillar, Ashford blocking her only exit. She was trapped. Again. Always trapped. "I wasn't working the night your mother was hurt," Cece said, forcing her voice steady. "I lost my license 6 months ago. I can't practice nursing anymore. I can't even step foot in a hospital without." Liar. Ashford pulled out his phone, swiped, held up the screen. Security footage. Grainy but clear enough. Cece in a janitor's uniform, mopping floors outside the ICU. 2 weeks ago. The night Eleanor Ashford coded. Cece's mind raced. How did he have this? The hospital must have turned over the footage. Which meant they were investigating too. Which meant she was being framed. Again. I was working as a janitor, Cece said desperately. That's all. I needed the money. I have a daughter and my father has dementia and we're barely surviving on 3 jobs. I don't care about your sob story. Ashford's voice was ice. I care about why you were in that hospital the same night someone nearly killed my mother with a medication error. The exact same type of error you were convicted of 6 months ago. I was convicted of negligence, not murder. And I didn't do that either. Cece's voice cracked. Someone falsified those medication logs. Someone set me up, destroyed my career, my reputation, everything. And you expect me to believe that happened twice? I don't expect you to believe anything. Cece was shaking now, tears burning behind her eyes. No one ever believes me. The hospital board didn't believe me. The jury didn't believe me. My own best friend stopped returning my calls because she was afraid being associated with me would ruin her career too. So no, Mr. Ashford, I don't expect you to believe a damn thing I say. Silence filled the garage. Ashford stared at her, and Cece saw him truly looking for the first time. Seeing the exhaustion carved into her face. The defeat in her shoulders. The way her hands shook, not from fear but from bone-deep weariness. If I'm wrong, Ashford said slowly, then someone at St. Mercy is still hurting patients. Still making mistakes that nearly kill people. Yes. Cece met his eyes. And they'll keep doing it because they got away with it before. They got away with it by blaming me. Then help me find them. Cece blinked. What? You know that hospital. You know the staff, the procedures where someone might hide evidence. Ashford's expression was calculating now, strategic. Work with me. Go back as a janitor. We investigate together. And when we find out who's really responsible, I get my name cleared, Cece finished, understanding dawning. My license back. My life back. And I get justice for my mother. It was a devil's bargain. Cece knew that. This man didn't trust her, probably hated her, and would throw her to the wolves the second she was no longer useful. But it was also the only chance she'd had in 6 months to prove her innocence. Why would I help you? Cece asked, even though she already knew her answer. Because whoever framed you before is still there, Ashford said. And they're still hurting people. You're a nurse, Monroe. Where you were. Can you really live with yourself knowing you could stop them and didn't? The oath. The words Cece had spoken when she graduated nursing school, when she believed she could make a difference in the world. I will do no harm. I will protect the vulnerable. I will seek truth. Fine, Cece whispered. I'll help you. Ashford nodded, satisfied. You start tomorrow night. Midnight shift. And Monroe? What? If I find out you're lying to me, if you're involved in any of this, I will destroy what's left of your life so completely, you'll wish you'd stayed in that elevator. Cece believed him. But who really hurt his mother? And why does Ashford seem so broken beneath that cold exterior? The answer would change everything, but first they'd have to survive each other. St. Mercy Hospital looked different at night. Cece stood in the staff entrance, janitorial uniform itchy against her skin, and felt ghosts pressing in from all sides. The ICU was down that hallway. The break room where she'd laughed with Natasha was around that corner. And somewhere in this building was the room where a patient had died, and Cece's life had ended with them. You're late. The night supervisor, a tired woman named Gladys, thrust a mop and bucket at her. 4th floor needs a full clean. Someone's kid threw up in the waiting area. Yes, ma'am. Cece took the supplies and headed for the elevator, keeping her head down. She'd pulled her hair back severely, wore no makeup, did everything possible to make herself forgettable. But on the 3rd floor she passed a cluster of nurses at the station. And one of them looked up. Natasha Reeves. Cece's best friend since nursing school. Her maid of honor at the wedding that never happened because Cece's fiancé left when the trial started. The person who knew Cece better than anyone. Their eyes met. Natasha's face went pale. She looked away quickly, said something to the other nurses, then disappeared down the corridor. The message was clear. We're not friends anymore. Don't acknowledge me. Don't ruin me by association. Cece's chest ached, but she kept walking. She couldn't afford feelings. Not here. The 4th floor was quiet, most patients sleeping. Cece worked methodically, mopping the waiting area, emptying trash cans, sanitizing surfaces. Invisible labor. The kind nobody noticed unless it wasn't done. She was good at being invisible now. Can't believe they let her back in here, a voice said. Cece froze, mop in hand. Two nurses stood outside a patient room, voices low but not quite low enough. I heard she's working as a janitor. Can you imagine? From RN to mopping floors. After what she did, she's lucky anyone will hire her. Do you think she actually did it? Killed that patient. The jury thought so. Cece's hands tightened on the mop handle until her knuckles went white. She wanted to scream at them. Wanted to defend herself, explain, make them understand. But what was the point? They'd already decided she was guilty. Everyone had. Cece finished the floor in silence, her hands shaking. Not from weakness. From the effort it took to hold herself together, to keep breathing through the humiliation. This is what rock bottom feels like, she thought. When even your own presence is considered contamination. But as she pushed her cart past the ICU, past the glass doors where she'd once run codes and saved lives, something shifted inside her. She'd taken an oath. A promise to protect people, to do no harm, to seek truth even when it was difficult. And right now, someone in this hospital was hurting patients and hiding behind her destroyed reputation. Cece might be working as a janitor. Might be invisible, voiceless, powerless. But she was still a nurse. And nurses protected people. Even when no one believed in them anymore. The pharmacy storage room was supposed to be locked at midnight, but someone had left it propped open with a doorstop. Cece had discovered this 3 nights ago, noted it, moved on. Tonight, with Ashford's accusations still ringing in her ears, she paused. Looked around. No security cameras in this particular corridor. Budget cuts had eliminated them 2 years ago. She slipped inside. The storage room was floor-to-ceiling shelves, organized by medication type. Painkillers, antibiotics, sedatives, morphine. Cece knew this room like she knew her own heartbeat. Had requisitioned medications from here hundreds of times when she was still an RN. She moved to the controlled substances section. The medications that required triple checking, sign-offs, locked cabinets with individual keys. And found the logbook. Cece flipped through pages, her nurse's eye scanning quickly. Medication dispensed, patient name, room number, administering nurse, supervisor signature. Everything looked normal. Until she reached 2 weeks ago. The night Eleanor Ashford coded. The entries were there. Morphine. Sedatives. Dispensed to room 512, Eleanor Ashford's room. Signed out by. Cece squinted at the signature. It was illegible. Just a scrawl that could be anyone. But the supervisor's signature was clear, Dr. V. Cross. Cece pulled out her phone, the cheap prepaid one that barely functioned, and photographed the pages. Her hands trembled slightly as she texted the images to the number Ashford had given her. A response came immediately. Where are you? Pharmacy storage. I found something. Don't move. I'm coming. Cece should have left then. Should have slipped out before anyone noticed. But her nurse's instincts were screaming now, telling her something was very, very wrong with these logs. She dug deeper. Went back 6 months to the night her patient had died. The same scrawled signature. The same supervisor, Dr. V. Cross. Cece's heart pounded. This was it. This was the connection. The same person supervising the medication errors that had destroyed her life and nearly killed Ashford's mother. You're dedicated, I'll give you that. Cece jumped, spinning around. Donovan Ashford stood in the doorway, dressed in dark clothes that made him blend with the shadows. For a billionaire CEO, he moved remarkably quietly. I found something, Cece said, holding up her phone. Look at the supervisor signatures. Same person, both incidents. Ashford crossed to her, studied the photos. His expression didn't change, but Cece saw his jaw tighten. Dr. Vivian Cross, he read. She's the head of pharmacy. Spotless record. 20 years at St. Mercy. Or 20 years of getting away with it. Cece's voice was stronger now, more confident. This was her territory. Medical investigation. Protecting patients. These signatures on the medication logs, they're not from the nurses who supposedly dispensed the drugs. They're too similar. Someone falsified them. You can prove that? With a handwriting analyst, maybe. But, Cece hesitated. But what? Why would the head of pharmacy falsify medication logs? What's the motive? Ashford was quiet for a long moment, his sharp mind clearly working through possibilities. Theft. Embezzlement. Selling controlled substances on the black market. That's a lot of risk for someone with a good salary and reputation. People have destroyed themselves for less. Ashford looked at her, and for the first time, there was no coldness in his eyes. Just exhaustion. Fear. The same emotions Cece saw in her own mirror every morning. Why are you really doing this, Monroe? You could have run. could have disappeared. Why stay and help me? The question hung between them, honest and raw. Cece thought of Lily asleep at home with Ray watching over her. Thought of the oath she'd taken. Thought of all the patients who might be hurt if someone like Dr. Cross was really operating unchecked in this hospital. Because I'm a nurse, Cece said quietly. I took an oath to protect people. Even if no one believes me anymore. Even if my license is gone and my reputation is destroyed. I'm still a nurse. And nurses don't walk away when people are in danger. Something shifted in Ashford's expression. The ice cracked just a little. He opened his mouth to respond. Can I help you too? They both froze. A woman stood in the doorway. 50-ish, impeccably dressed even at midnight, dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her white coat was pristine, her hospital badge gleaming. Dr. Vivian Cross. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. The pharmacy storage room is off-limits to janitorial staff. And visitors certainly shouldn't be here at all. I was just cleaning, Cece said, her voice steadier than she felt. Mr. Ashford was looking for his mother's room. I was giving him directions. At midnight? In a locked storage room? Dr. Cross's smile widened, showing too many teeth. How helpful of you. Ashford stepped forward and Cece saw him transform. The cold, powerful CO sliding back into place like armor. Dr. Cross. I wanted to thank you personally for taking care of my mother during her stay. She speaks very highly of you. How kind. Dr. Cross's eyes flicked between them, calculating. Though I believe visiting hours ended quite some time ago. I'm Donovan Ashford. I don't follow visiting hours. Of course. Dr. Cross's tone was pleasant, professional. Well, I wouldn't want to keep you. I'm sure you both have other places to be. It was a dismissal. A polite, professional threat wrapped in courtesy. Cece gathered her phone, her heart hammering. As she passed Dr. Cross, the doctor's hand shot out, gripping Cece's arm. I know who you are, Dr. Cross said softly, her voice pitched so only Cece could hear. Celeste Monroe. The nurse who killed that patient. You should be more careful. Wouldn't want any more accidents. Then she released Cece and smiled brightly at Ashford. Have a good night, Mr. Ashford. Cece and Ashford walked out in silence, not speaking until they reached the parking garage. She knows, Cece said, her voice shaking. She knows we're investigating. Good. Ashford's expression was grim. Now we know who we're hunting. You don't understand. She just threatened me. If she's really behind this, if she's willing to kill patients to cover her tracks. Then we find proof before she can hurt anyone else. Ashford looked at Cece and there was something new in his eyes. Not trust, not yet. But the beginning of belief. You were right, Monroe. Your instincts about her. I dismissed them and I was wrong. It was the closest thing to an apology Cece had received in 6 months. What do we do now? Cece asked. Now? Ashford's smile was cold. Sure. Now we find out exactly what Dr. Vivian Cross is hiding. And we make sure she pays for every life she's destroyed. Cece nodded. They had evidence. They had a suspect. And for the first time since this nightmare began, Cece had something she'd lost 6 months ago. Oh, who is this woman? And why does she look so calm, yet so dangerous? The answer will change everything. But first they'll have to figure out if they can trust each other, before Dr. Cross destroys them both. If you're watching this and wondering whether the truth is worth fighting for, drop a comment. Because Cece is about to find out exactly how much it costs to stand up when the whole world wants you to stay down. The next morning, Cece arrived at the hospital with her janitorial uniform pressed and her nerves frayed. She'd barely slept, the image of Dr. Cross's calm, threatening smile replaying on loop in her mind. She was mopping the third-floor corridor when she heard the footsteps. Ms. Monroe. Cece turned and there she was. Dr. Vivian Cross, impeccable in her white coat, a clipboard tucked under one arm. Her smile was warm, professional. The kind of smile that made patients trust her with their lives. It made Cece's skin crawl. Dr. Cross. Cece gripped the mop handle tighter, trying to look casual. Invisible. Just another janitor doing her job. I wanted to apologize for last night. Cross stepped closer, her voice pitched low and sympathetic. I didn't mean to startle you. It's just that the pharmacy storage room contains controlled substances, and we have to be so careful about security. Of course. I understand. I'm sure you do. Cross's eyes were sharp, assessing. After all, you used to work here. As a nurse. Before, well, such a shame what happened. The words were coated in false sympathy, but underneath, Cece heard the threat. I know who you are. I know what they say you did. I know you're vulnerable. Yes, Cece managed. It was a shame. These things happen though. Medical errors. One small mistake and everything falls apart. Cross tilted her head, studying Cece like a specimen under glass. The important thing is learning from our mistakes. Being more careful. Not putting ourselves in situations where accidents might occur again. Cece's heart hammered. I'm just here to clean, Dr. Cross. That's all. Of course you are. Cross smiled wider. Well, I won't keep you. I'm sure you have floors to mop. She walked away, heels clicking against linoleum, leaving Cece shaking. Van found her 20 minutes later in the stairwell, sitting on the steps with her head in her hands. She threatened me, Cece said without looking up. Not directly. But she threatened me. Van sat down beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Tell me exactly what she said. Cece repeated the conversation, and watched Van's expression harden with each word. She's protecting something, Van said. People don't make threats unless they're scared. Or unless they're warning off someone weak. Cece finally looked at him. That's what I am to her. Weak. Already destroyed. Easy to eliminate if I become a problem. You're not weak. Van's voice was firm. Certain. Weak people don't keep fighting when the entire world tells them they're guilty. Weak people give up. Something warm bloomed in Cece's chest. It had been so long since anyone believed in her strength. I pulled her file, Van continued, scrolling through his phone. Dr. Vivian Cross. Harvard Medical School. 20 years at St. Mercy. 3 Excellence Awards. Published research. Glowing recommendations from every supervisor she's ever had. Perfect, Cece muttered. Of course she's perfect. Too perfect. Van frowned at the screen. People aren't this clean. Everyone has something. A bad review, a personality conflict, a mistake. But Cross? Nothing. It's like she's been scrubbed. Or like she's very good at making problems disappear. Cece stood, pacing the small stairwell. I'm telling you, something's wrong with her. I can feel it. The way she looks at people like we're just obstacles. Tools. Things to be managed. Feelings aren't evidence, Monroe. Van's tone was gentle but firm. We need proof. Documentation. Something concrete. So you don't believe me? I believe someone is hurting patients at this hospital. I believe Dr. Cross might be involved. But I also believe in building a case that will actually stand up in court. Van stood, meeting her eyes. Logic, not intuition. Logic told me to plead guilty, Cece shot back. Logic told me no one would believe a nurse over a hospital's legal team. My intuition was the only thing screaming that something was wrong. They stared at each other, tension crackling between them. He was all sharp edges and cold analysis. She was raw emotion and gut instinct. And somehow they had to find a way to work together. Fine, Van said finally. We do both. I'll follow the logic. You follow your instincts. And we meet in the middle. It wasn't trust. Not yet. But it was a start. Deal? Cece said. And as Van left the stairwell, Cece realized something had shifted between them. They weren't just investigator and suspect anymore. They were partners. Even if neither of them was quite ready to admit it. Cece stumbled through her apartment door at 11 p.m., every muscle screaming. 3 shifts. 14 hours. And tomorrow she'd do it all again. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. Then she smelled it. Burnt cheese. Scorched bread. The unmistakable scent of a 7-year-old attempting to cook. Lily? Cece dropped her bag, panic rising. Lily, where are you? In here, Mama. Cece rushed to the kitchen and found her daughter standing on a chair at the stove, proudly holding a plate with 2 charred rectangles that might have once been grilled cheese sandwiches. I made dinner. Lily beamed. You're always so tired, so I wanted to help. Cece's heart cracked open. She pulled Lily off the chair, checking her for burns. Baby, you can't use the stove when I'm not home. You could have gotten hurt. But I was careful. And Grandpa Ray helped. Lily pointed to the living room where Ray sat in his armchair, staring at the television playing static. Oh God. Ray had been supervising. Ray, who sometimes forgot he'd already eaten breakfast. Ray, who occasionally wandered outside in his pajamas looking for the fire station he'd retired from 15 years ago. Are you okay, Mama? Lily's small hand touched Cece's face. You look sad. Cece looked at her daughter, 7 years old, dark curls escaping her ponytail, eyes wide with innocent concern, and felt something break inside her. She sank to the kitchen floor, pulling Lily into her lap and let the tears come. Not the controlled, 3-minute crying she allowed herself in diner bathrooms. Real tears. The kind that came from 6 months of holding everything together with nothing but willpower and desperation. Mama? Lily's voice was small, scared. I'm okay, baby. Cece held her tighter. I'm so tired. It's okay to be sad sometimes, Lily said, parroting something Cece had told her after the trial, after the media storm, after they'd lost the house and moved into this cramped apartment. You told me that. Remember? Cece laughed through her tears. I remember. They sat there on the kitchen floor, burnt grilled cheese forgotten, until Ray wandered in. He looked at Cece with cloudy, confused eyes. Margaret? Is that you? Margaret. Cece's mother. Dead for 12 years. It's me, Dad. It's Cece. But Ray was already lost in memory, his weathered face softening with love meant for a ghost. You came back. I knew you would. You always come back. Cece stood, gently guiding him toward his bedroom. Let's get you to bed, Dad. She helped him into his pajamas, made sure he took his evening medications, tucked him in like he used to tuck her in when she was Lily's age, when he was still fully himself. Before the dementia started stealing pieces of him, one memory at a time. Love you, sweetheart, Ray mumbled, already half asleep. Love you too, Dad. By the time Cece returned to the living room, Lily had fallen asleep on the couch, still in her school clothes, one small hand clutching her stuffed rabbit. Cece covered her with a blanket, then collapsed onto the other end of the couch. Her eyes fell on the frame hanging above the television. Her nursing license. She'd kept it even after it was revoked. Kept it as a reminder of who she used to be. Celeste Monroe, RN. Oath taken. Promise made. I will do no harm. I will protect the vulnerable. I will seek truth. Some promises were easier to keep than others. If you've ever felt like you're holding everything together by a thread, Cece thought, staring at that license through exhausted tears, then you know this feeling. The weight of being strong when you have nothing left. The fear of failing the people who depend on you. If you've ever felt this way, you're not alone. Cece wasn't alone either. She just didn't know it yet. The knock came at midnight. Cece jerked awake on the couch, disoriented. Lily was still asleep beside her. Ray's snores drifted from his bedroom. Another knock. Firm. Insistent. Cece peered through the peephole and her breath caught. Donovan Ashford stood in her hallway, wearing dark jeans and a t-shirt that made him look less like a billionaire CEO and more like a person. He held a laptop under one arm and a large pizza box in the other. Cece opened the door. What are you doing here? I need you to look at something. Van's eyes were intense, urgent. Medical files from the 5 patients I mentioned. I need your expertise. It's midnight. I know. I'm sorry. But I couldn't sleep and I thought. Van stopped, seeming to see her apartment for the first time. The cramped space. The sagging furniture. Lily's crayon drawings taped to the refrigerator alongside Ray's medication schedule. The smell of burnt grilled cheese still lingering in the air. Cece watched his face, waiting for judgment. Pity. The expression rich people always wore when confronted with how the other half lived. But Van's expression was something else entirely. Something that looked almost like pain. I'm sorry, he said again, quieter. I didn't realize. Didn't realize poor people have lives too? Cece crossed her arms, defensive. Didn't realize single mothers juggling 3 jobs and a father with dementia might not be available for midnight meetings? That's not. Van ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. I didn't realize you were telling the truth. About everything. The words hung between them. You thought I was lying, Cece said slowly. About losing everything. About struggling. About not being the villain in your story. Yes. Van met her eyes. And I was wrong. I'm sorry. It was the second apology he'd given her. The first real one. Cece stepped back, opening the door wider. Come in. But be quiet. Lily's asleep. Van entered and Cece watched him take in her life. The medications lined up on the counter. The stack of unpaid bills she'd been avoiding. The medical textbook from nursing school that she still pulled out sometimes just to remember. Is that pizza? Lily's sleepy voice came from the couch. Lily, it's late. But Lily was already sitting up, rubbing her eyes, staring at Van with open curiosity. Are you the prince? Van blinked. What? Mama reads me stories about princes who save people. Are you here to save Mama? Cece's face burned. Lily, this is Mr. Ashford. He's not a prince. He's just. No, Van said softly, crouching to Lily's eye level. I'm not a prince. I'm just someone who made a mistake. And I'm trying to fix it. That's good. Lily nodded seriously. Mama says everyone makes mistakes. The important part is fixing them. Van glanced at Cece, something warm and unexpected in his expression. Your mama is very wise. They ended up at the kitchen table, pizza between them, laptop open to medical files. Lily ate a slice while peppering Van with questions about whether billionaires lived in castles. No, and if he had a dragon. Also no, disappointing. Ray wandered out once, confused about the visitor, but Van handled it with surprising gentleness. Introduced himself, helped Ray back to bed, didn't flinch at the dementia or the confusion. And slowly as the night wore on and Cece reviewed files, something shifted. Van told her about his sister. About watching her die in an operating table when he was 23 because a nurse had mixed up medications. About the guilt of not being there, of being across the country building his first company when she needed him most. I couldn't save her, Van said quietly, staring at his cold pizza. So I built an empire trying to save everyone else. Pharmaceutical companies. Medical device manufacturers. Anything that gave me control over healthcare outcomes. You can't control everything, Cece said gently. Sometimes bad things just happen. Not because anyone failed, but because we're human. And humans are fragile. I know. Van looked at her. But knowing it and accepting it are different things. Cece understood that. She knew intellectually that she wasn't responsible for the patient's death. But accepting her innocence, truly believing it, was harder. They worked through the files together. Cece's medical knowledge combined with Van's analytical mind. And somewhere around 3 a.m., between discussions of patient symptoms and medication timing, they started laughing. About the absurdity of their situation. About Lily's dragon questions. About Ray thinking Van was the plumber. It was strange. It was inappropriate given everything between them. It was the first time Cece had laughed, really laughed, in 6 months. When Lily climbed into Cece's lap, half asleep, Van smiled. The first genuine smile Cece had seen from him. She's lucky, Van said. To have you. I'm the lucky one. Cece stroked Lily's hair. She keeps me fighting when I want to give up. You wouldn't give up. Van's voice was certain. You're too stubborn. You barely know me. I know you've been destroyed, humiliated, and ground into dust. And you're still here. Still fighting. Van met her eyes. That's not stubbornness. That's strength. Something warm and dangerous bloomed in Cece's chest. This was a bad idea. Getting close to him. Letting herself feel anything beyond professional cooperation. But God, it had been so long since someone looked at her like she mattered. Like she wasn't just a cautionary tale or a scandal. Like she was human. I should go, Van said, but he didn't move. Yes, Cece agreed. You should. Neither of them moved. And in that cramped kitchen, with her sleeping daughter in her arms and dawn breaking outside the window, Cece let herself imagine, just for a moment, what it might feel like to not be alone. The pattern emerged 3 days later. Cece and Van sat in his penthouse office, surrounded by printed medical records, their fingers stained with highlighter ink. Here. Cece pointed to a file. Patricia Henley. Age 42. Sudden respiratory failure during routine surgery. Required emergency intervention. Survived. And here. Van pulled up another record. Thomas Chin. Age 58. Respiratory failure during post-op recovery. Survived. Marcus Webb, Simone Rodriguez, and Janet Kim. Cece laid out 3 more files. All sudden respiratory failures. All survived. All within the last 2 years. All with Dr. Cross as their pharmacy supervisor. Van's voice was grim. They stared at the evidence, the implications heavy in the air. What if someone's testing something? Van said slowly. Using patients as guinea pigs? Or stealing? Cece's mind raced through possibilities. High-grade sedatives and morphine can be sold for thousands on the black market. If Cross is falsifying records, she could be skimming medications and selling them. But why nearly kill patients? Why not just steal smaller amounts that wouldn't be noticed? Maybe she made a mistake. Cece stood pacing. Maybe she replaced stolen medication with something similar but wrong dosage. Or maybe, she stopped. Maybe she's testing to see what dose is safe for black market buyers. If you're selling to addicts, you need to know the margins between effective and lethal. Van's expression darkened. She's using hospital patients as test subjects. It's a theory. We need proof. Her office. Van pulled up building schematics on his computer. If she's keeping records of illegal sales, they'd be there. Somewhere the hospital board can't access during routine audits. You want to break into her office? Yes. Cece should have said no. Should have remembered she was already on thin ice, already one accusation away from complete destruction. But she thought of those 5 patients. Thought of Eleanor Ashford, still recovering. Thought of whoever might be next if they didn't stop Cross. When? Cece asked. Van smiled. Tonight. They were planning the break-in when Cece's phone buzzed. Natasha's name flashed on the screen. Cece hadn't heard from her former best friend in weeks. Not since that moment in the hospital corridor when Natasha had looked away. I need to take this. Cece stepped into the hallway answering. Natasha. Cece. Natasha's voice was tight, scared. We need to talk. I tried talking to you. You ignored me. I know, and I'm sorry, but... Natasha lowered her voice. You need to stop. Whatever you're doing with Ashford, whatever investigation you think you're running. Stop. Cece's blood went cold. How do you know about? Because Cross knows. She knows you're digging around, asking questions, looking at files. Natasha sounded terrified. Cece, she ruined you once. She'll do it again. She'll do worse. Then help me prove what she's doing. I can't. Why not? Because you're scared? Because protecting your career is more important than... Because she threatened my daughter. Natasha's voice cracked. She knows where Mia goes to school. She knows my ex-husband is fighting me for custody. She said if I caused problems, she'd make sure I lost Mia. Cece sank against the wall. Oh, Nat. So please just drop this. Go back to being invisible. It's safer. Safer for who? Not for the patient she's hurting. Not for the next person she decides to frame. Better them than us. Natasha's words were bitter, defeated. I'm sorry, Cece. I really am. But I can't help you. She hung up. Cece stood in the hallway, phone clutched in her hand, feeling more alone than ever. Van found her there. What happened? Natasha knows we're investigating. Which means Cross knows. Cece looked at him. She threatened Natasha's daughter. Used her custody battle as leverage. So Cross has a pattern of threatening children. Van's voice was ice. That's good. It gives us more ammunition. How is that good? It means she'll come after Lily next. Not if we get to her first. Van gripped Cece's shoulders, forcing her to meet his eyes. We're close, Monroe. We're so close. Tonight we get the proof. Tomorrow we turn it over to the FBI. And by next week, Cross is in handcuffs. And if we fail? We won't. It wasn't a promise. It was a command. A decision that didn't allow for failure. Cece wished she had his certainty. But she followed him back into the office and they finalized their plan. Tonight, they'd break into Dr. Cross's office. Tonight, they'd find the proof. And tonight, one way or another, this would end. St. Mercy Hospital at 2 a.m. was a different world. The main lights dimmed. Only emergency personnel on duty. The building felt hollow, haunted. Cece and Van moved through corridors she knew by heart, avoiding security cameras, using her staff keycard to access restricted areas. Dr. Cross's office was on the 4th floor, administrative wing. Cece's hands shook as Van picked the lock, apparently one of many skills billionaires acquired. The door clicked open. They slipped inside, closing it behind them. The office was neat, obsessively organized. Diplomas on the wall. Awards on the shelves. Everything positioned with mathematical precision. You check the desk, Van whispered. I'll check the files. Cece moved to the large mahogany desk, opening drawers with gloved hands. Standard office supplies. Medical journals. A framed photo of Cross receiving an award. Nothing incriminating. Van, I'm not finding. Here. Van was kneeling by the filing cabinet, shining his phone light on a locked bottom drawer. This one's different. Reinforced lock. Hidden under the others. He picked it quickly. The drawer slid open. Inside was a leather ledger. Van pulled it out, opened it, and Cece saw his face go pale in the phone light. What is it? Names. Dates. Medications. Prices. Van's voice was barely a whisper. It's a sales ledger. Black market transactions going back 5 years. Cece leaned over his shoulder, scanning the entries. Morphine. Fentanyl. High-grade sedatives. Sold to buyers listed only by initials. And in the margins, notes in Cross's precise handwriting. Patient tolerated 15 milligrams. Respiratory depression minimal. Safe for 20 milligrams sale. Oh my God, Cece breathed. She's been using patients to test drug doses for her buyers. Photograph everything. Van handed Cece his phone. Every page. Cece worked quickly, photographing pages while Van searched for more evidence. They found bank statements, offshore accounts, communications with buyers. It was enough. More than enough. They'd won. Then the security alarm screamed. Go. Van grabbed the ledger, shoving it inside his jacket. Now. They ran. Out of the office, down the corridor. Behind them, footsteps. Security guards shouting. This way. Cece pulled Van into a service stairwell. They took the stairs two at a time, racing toward the ground floor. But security was faster. They heard voices above and below. Trap. Here. Van yanked open a door. A supply closet. They squeezed inside, pulling the door shut just as footsteps thundered past. The closet was tiny. Barely large enough for two people. Cece was pressed against Van, could feel his heart hammering against his ribs. Or maybe that was her heart. She couldn't tell anymore. They stood frozen, breathing hard, listening to security search the stairwell. Van's arm was around her waist, holding her steady. Cece's face was inches from his chest. She could smell him, expensive cologne mixed with fierce sweat. I was wrong about you, Van whispered against her hair. Cece tilted her head up, found him looking down at her with an expression she couldn't read in the darkness. I know, she whispered back. His hand came up, cupped her cheek. She should pull away. This was a bad idea. They were partners, nothing more, hiding in a closet while security hunted them. But then his lips were on hers, and Cece forgot every reason this was wrong. The kiss was desperate. Hungry. Like they were both drowning and had just found air. Van's hand slid into her hair. Cece gripped his shirt, pulling him closer, losing herself in sensation and heat and the first moment of feeling alive in 6 months. Check this floor. Must have gone down. The security guard's voice broke them apart. They stood there, breathing hard, staring at each other in the dark. We should go, Van whispered. Yeah. But neither of them moved. Not until the footsteps faded completely. They escaped through the basement loading dock, running across the parking lot to Van's car. He drove fast, checking mirrors, making sure they weren't followed. Only when they were miles from the hospital did Cece finally breathe. We got it, she said. We actually got it. We got it. Van glanced at her, and his expression was soft. Open. You were right, Monroe. Your instincts. They were right all along. Don't get used to it. Happens maybe twice a year. Van laughed, and the sound filled the car with warmth. They'd done it. They had proof. Tomorrow they'd take it to the authorities. Tomorrow Cross would pay. Tomorrow Cece's name would be cleared. Tonight, for the first time in forever, she let herself hope. The call came at 7 a.m. Cece was making breakfast. Ray was reading yesterday's newspaper. Lily was getting ready for school. Normal. Everything was finally, blessedly normal. Then her phone rang. St. Gabriel's Elementary. The school. Miss Monroe? This is Nurse Patricia. Lily collapsed in her classroom. We're transporting her to St. Mercy right now. The world tilted. Cece barely remembered the drive to the hospital. Just terror. Just please God, not my baby, not my baby, not my baby on repeat in her head. She burst through the ER doors wild-eyed and demanded to see her daughter. The nurse directed her to room 3. Lily lay in a hospital bed looking small and pale but alive. Conscious. And 4 in her little arm. Mama? Lily reached for her. Cece crushed her daughter against her chest, checking her over with shaking hands. What happened? Are you okay? What? She's fine. A familiar voice. Cece looked up. Dr. Vivian Cross stood in the doorway, white coat pristine, smile warm and concerned. Just dehydration and stress, Cross said pleasantly. Children are so sensitive. They pick up on their mother's anxiety, you know? The threat was clear. Unmistakable. I can get to your daughter whenever I want. You should be more careful, Cross continued, moving to check Lily's 4 with practiced efficiency. About everything. Stress is so dangerous for children. Cece couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. Terror had closed her throat. This was her fault. Her investigation had put Lily in danger. Cross had demonstrated her reach, her power, her willingness to hurt anyone who threatened her. I've started Lily on fluids, Cross said. She'll be fine to go home in a few hours. But do be careful, Ms. Monroe. We wouldn't want anything worse to happen. Cross left. Cece held Lily and shook. Van found them an hour later. He took one look at Cece's face and understood. She got to Lily, Cece whispered over her daughter's head. She did this. We don't know. I know. Cece's voice broke. I know, Van. This was a message. Back off or next time will be worse. Van's jaw tightened. Then we move faster. We go to the FBI today. No. Cece pulled back, looking at him with tears streaming down her face. I can't. I can't risk Lily. She's all I have. Cece. I'm done. I'm out. Cece felt something inside her shatter. You were right. I should have stayed invisible. Should have kept my head down. Now my daughter is in a hospital bed because I thought I could fight back. You can fight back. We're so close. Not at this cost. Cece kissed Lily's forehead. I'm sorry, Van. I can't help you anymore. Van stared at her for a long moment. Then quietly, pack your things. You, Lily and Ray. You're moving into my guest house. What? If Cross can get to Lily at school, she can get to her at your apartment. My estate has security. Guards. Cameras. Van's voice was firm. Final. I should have offered sooner. I'm offering now. Van, I can't. You can. And you will. He met her eyes. Because I'm not letting that woman hurt anyone else you love. Not while I have the power to stop it. Cece wanted to argue. Wanted to maintain her pride, her independence. But she looked at Lily, pale and small in that hospital bed, and knew she couldn't protect her daughter alone. Sometimes accepting help wasn't weakness. Sometimes it was the bravest thing you could do. Okay, Cece whispered. Okay. The Ashford estate was 50 acres of manicured lawns and old money. The guest house alone was larger than Cece's apartment. Lily ran through the rooms, delighted, her hospital scare already forgotten with the resilience of childhood. Ray wandered the gardens, touching roses with gentle, confused fingers. And Cece stood in the doorway, feeling like an imposter in someone else's life. It's too much, she said when Van appeared with their hastily packed bags. It's necessary. Van set the bags down. My father will be by later. He's eager to meet you properly. Your father knows about me? I told him you're helping with the investigation. He's surprisingly supportive. Van smiled slightly. He thinks you're good for me. Good for you? Cece almost laughed. I'm a disgraced nurse who brought danger to your doorstep. You're a woman who refused to stop fighting for the truth even when it cost her everything. Van stepped closer. That's not disgrace. That's honor. Cece felt tears threaten again. She was so tired of crying. So tired of feeling weak. Why are you doing this? She asked. Really? You could have hired a private investigator. Could have handled this a dozen different ways. Why involve me? Van was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft. Bro. Because my sister died alone, he said. On an operating table, surrounded by strangers, because I was too busy building my empire to be there when she needed me. I've spent 15 years trying to control outcomes, trying to prevent that kind of loss from happening to anyone else. But you can't control everything. I know. Van met her eyes. But I can be there. I can stand with someone when they're fighting an impossible fight. I couldn't save my sister. But maybe I can help you save others. Cece understood then. This wasn't about justice or revenge. It was about redemption. For both of them. Gerald Ashford arrived that evening, a warm man with kind eyes who treated Cece like an honored guest rather than a charity case. He brought toys for Lily, a gardening book for Ray, and a bottle of wine for Cece that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Van's different around you, Gerald said quietly while Van showed Lily the pool. More human. Less machine. Cece didn't know what to say to that. That night, she found Van sitting by the pool, staring at the water. Can't sleep? She asked. Rarely do. Van glanced at her. You? Lily's in a strange place. I'm keeping an ear out. Cece sat beside him, their shoulders almost touching. Your father seems nice. He's the best man I know. Van smiled. Which is probably why we clash so often. I'm more like my mother. Cold. Calculating. Focused on winning. You're not cold. You haven't seen me in a boardroom. No, but I've seen you with Lily. With Ray. With your mother. Cece turned to face him. You're not cold, Van. You're scared. And you hide it behind control and power because that feels safer than being vulnerable. Van was silent. Then, my sister died because I wasn't there. Because I was building my first company, chasing success, convinced I had time. His voice broke. I didn't have time. And she died alone. Scared. Calling for me. That wasn't your fault. How do you know? Because fault requires intent. Or negligence. And you didn't intend for her to die. You didn't neglect her. You were living your life the way she would have wanted you to. Cece reached for his hand. Sometimes bad things just happen. Not because anyone failed, but because life is unpredictable and cruel and we don't get to control the endings. That's what terrifies me, Van admitted. The lack of control. The randomness. The way everything can fall apart in a second. I know. Cece squeezed his hand. But you can't stop living because you're afraid of losing. That's not life. That's just existing. They sat there by the pool, hands clasped, two broken people trying to figure out how to be whole. And for the first time since his sister died, Van let himself imagine what it might feel like to let go of control. To trust someone other than himself. To trust Cece. 3 days passed in a strange, suspended peace. Cece still worked her shifts. Van insisted she maintain her cover at the hospital, but she came home to the guest house. To Lily's laughter as she swam in the pool. To Ray's calm contentment in the gardens, where familiar smells seemed to bring back fragments of memory. To Van showing up each evening with case files and coffee, their investigation continuing in whispered conversations after Lily went to bed. They were building something. Not just a case against Dr. Cross. Something else. Something neither of them was quite ready to name. But Eleanor Ashford was about to shatter that fragile peace. The call came on the 4th evening. Van's phone buzzed during dinner. Cece had cooked, nothing fancy, just pasta and salad, but Lily had helped and it felt almost like a family. Van's expression darkened as he looked at the screen. It's my mother. I need to take this. He stepped outside and Cece tried not to eavesdrop. Tried not to notice how his voice rose, sharp and defensive. When he returned, his face was stone. Problem? Cece asked carefully. My mother wants to see me. Tomorrow. Alone. Van's jaw was tight. Apparently she has concerns about my recent choices. Cece's stomach dropped. She knows I'm here. Someone told her. Van's eyes were dark. And I think we both know who. Cross. Of course it was Cross. The next afternoon, Van left for his mother's mansion. Cece tried to focus on Lily, on helping Ray with his crossword puzzle, on anything except the growing dread in her chest. She was folding laundry when she heard Van's voice, raised and angry, coming from his study in the main house. Cece knew she shouldn't listen. Knew it was private. But her feet carried her across the lawn anyway, close enough to hear through the half-open window. Not your decision to make. Van was saying. She tried to kill me, Donovan. Eleanor's voice, still weak but furious. That woman. That nurse. And you've brought her into your home? Around your family? She didn't try to kill you. Dr. Cross did. Cece is helping me prove it. Dr. Cross is a respected physician who has shown me nothing but care. This woman, this Monroe, is manipulating you. Can't you see that? She's not manipulating. She's a disgraced nurse with nothing to lose. Of course she's telling you what you want to hear. It's her only chance at redemption. Eleanor's voice cracked. Please, Donovan. I almost died. And you're defending the person responsible. She wasn't responsible. Someone set her up. Or she's lying. And you're so desperate to play hero that you can't see it. Eleanor sounded like she was crying now. I'm your mother. I almost died. Doesn't that matter to you? Silence. Then Van, quieter. Of course it matters. Then prove it. Send that woman away. Stop this investigation. Let the police handle it. Mother. I'm asking you to choose, Donovan. Her or me. Cece's heart stopped. She shouldn't be hearing this. Shouldn't be witnessing Van torn between his mother and, what? A woman he'd known for a few weeks? A partnership built on shared trauma and desperation? She backed away from the window, returning to the guest house with her chest tight. This was wrong. All of it. She was a burden. A complication. Van had his own family, his own life, and she was dragging him into danger and conflict and... Mama? Lily looked up from her coloring book. Why are you crying? Cece touched her face. What? She'd been crying and hadn't even realized. I'm okay, baby. But she wasn't okay. Because she understood now what she should have understood from the beginning. She didn't belong here. In this house, this life, this world of people who had the luxury of choosing between right and comfortable. Cece had never had that luxury. And she couldn't ask Van to give up his mother for her. When Van returned an hour later, his face was carefully blank. Controlled. The mask was back in place. We need to talk, he said. I know. Cece stood, smoothing her jeans with nervous hands. I heard. Not on purpose, I was just... You heard? Yes. They stood in the guest house living room, Lily coloring nearby, Ray dozing in the armchair. A domestic scene that felt like a lie. My mother is still weak, Van said carefully. Still recovering. She's confused about what happened, and Dr. Cross has been. He paused. Influencing her. Making her believe you're dangerous. Maybe I am. Cece forced the words out. Maybe your mother's right. Maybe I bring nothing but trouble. Don't. Van's voice was sharp. Don't do that. Do what? Believe their lies. Let them make you small. Van stepped closer. You're not trouble, Cece. You're the only person in this entire situation who's been honest from the beginning. Your mother almost died. Because of Dr. Cross. Not you. Van's hands clenched into fists. I told my mother that. I told her you're innocent. That I have proof. And what did she say? Van's silence was answer enough. She didn't believe him. Eleanor Ashford, the woman who loved her son unconditionally, couldn't believe that Cece Monroe was anything but a threat. Maybe you should listen to her, Cece heard herself say. Maybe this investigation, this partnership, maybe it's putting too much at risk. Your relationship with your mother. Your family. Don't. Van closed the distance between them, his eyes intense. Don't leave. Van. I know what you're thinking. That you're a burden. That I'm sacrificing too much. That you should disappear and make everyone's life easier. Van's voice dropped. But you're wrong. You're not a burden. He stopped. Seemed to struggle with something. I'm what? Cece whispered. You're the first person in 15 years who's made me feel like I'm more than my worst failure. Van's hand came up, cupped her cheek. When I'm with you, I'm not the man who couldn't save his sister. I'm not the CEO who controls everything. I'm just me. And that terrifies me. But it also makes me feel alive in a way I'd forgotten was possible. Cece's breath caught. This is a bad idea. Probably. Your mother hates me. She'll come around. Dr. Cross is dangerous. Then we'll stop her together. Van's thumb brushed across her cheekbone. Don't leave, Cece. Please. Don't let them win by making you disappear. Cece wanted to be strong. Wanted to walk away, protect him from the chaos she carried. But she was so tired of being strong alone. Okay, she whispered. I'll stay. Promise. Promise. Van pulled her into his arms, and Cece let herself be held. Let herself imagine just for a moment that this could work. That she could have this. Safety. Support. Someone who believed in her. But promises were easy to make. And in the shadows of St. Mercy Hospital, Dr. Vivian Cross was already planning her next move. The phone call from Eleanor came directly to Cece 2 days later. Cece stared at the unknown number, debating whether to answer. But something, instinct, curiosity, dread, made her pick up. Ms. Monroe. Eleanor Ashford's voice was cold. Imperious. We need to speak. Mrs. Ashford, I don't think. I'm not asking. I'm at the east gate of the estate. Come alone. The call disconnected. Cece should have told Van. Should have ignored the summons entirely. But she thought of him, torn between his mother and his investigation. Thought of the pain in his voice when he spoke about his sister. Maybe she could fix this. Maybe she could talk to Eleanor, make her understand. It was a foolish hope. But Cece was full of foolish hopes. She left Lily with Ray, both watching cartoons safe, and walked across the estate to the east gate. Eleanor Ashford sat in the back of a black town car, looking frail but fierce. Despite her recent hospitalization, she wore her wealth like armor. Designer clothes, perfect makeup, the kind of confidence that came from a lifetime of being obeyed. Cece slid into the car, and Eleanor's driver pulled away from the gate. Where are we going? Cece asked. Nowhere. We're simply going to have a conversation without my son interfering. Eleanor studied Cece with sharp eyes. Dr. Cross came to see me yesterday. She told me some very interesting things about you. Of course she did. Mrs. Ashford, I know what the records say. I know what the trial concluded. But I didn't kill that patient. Someone framed me. Yes. My son has told me your story. Eleanor waved a dismissive hand. A vast conspiracy to destroy a nobody nurse. How very convenient. It's not. Let me tell you what I know, Ms. Monroe. Eleanor's voice was ice. I know you've insinuated yourself into my son's life during a vulnerable time. I know you're living in his guest house, eating his food, accepting his protection. I know he's become attached to you. Cece's face burned. Van is helping me investigate. Donovan is trying to save you because he couldn't save his sister. Eleanor's words were surgical, precise. You represent his greatest failure. And he's convinced himself that if he can redeem you, he can redeem himself. The words hit like a physical blow. Was that true? Was Van's belief in her just another attempt to control outcomes, to fix what had broken 15 years ago? I don't believe that, Cece said, but her voice wavered. Don't you? Eleanor leaned forward. Let me ask you something. If my son weren't a billionaire, if he couldn't offer you protection, couldn't help you clear your name, couldn't provide for your daughter, would you still be in his life? That's not fair. Answer the question. Cece wanted to say yes. Wanted to claim she'd care about Van regardless of his resources. But she'd met him because he accused her of trying to kill his mother. Their partnership was built on mutual need, not affection. If he'd been anyone else, would they have even given each other a chance? I care about your son, Cece said quietly. Not because of what he can give me. Because of who he is. And who is he exactly? Eleanor's smile was sharp. Do you know him at all? Or do you only know the version of himself he shows you, the wounded hero trying to save the damsel in distress? Cece had no answer. Because Eleanor was right. She didn't really know Van. Didn't know what he was like with friends, with colleagues in his normal life. She only knew him in crisis. In investigation. In the heightened emotions of fighting a common enemy. You're not good for him, Eleanor continued. You're a reminder of everything he couldn't control. And when this investigation ends, whether you're vindicated or exposed, he'll realize that. He'll realize you're just another broken thing he tried to fix. I'm not broken. But Cece's voice lacked conviction. Aren't you? Eleanor's expression was almost pitying. You've lost everything. Your career, your reputation, your dignity. You're working 3 jobs just to survive. Your father has dementia. Your daughter is growing up in chaos. Eleanor paused. You're drowning Ms. Monroe. And you're pulling my son down with you. Tears burned behind Cece's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. What do you want from me? Cece whispered. I want you to leave. Take your daughter and your father and disappear from Donovan's life. Eleanor pulled out a check already written. This is enough money to start over somewhere new. Somewhere far from here. Somewhere you can build a life without dragging my son into your disasters. Cece stared at the check. More money than she'd earn in 5 years. Enough to give Lily a good school, Ray proper care, herself a chance to breathe. All she had to do was leave Van. I can't, Cece said. Can't? Or won't? Both. Cece met Eleanor's eyes. Your son asked me to stay. And I promised him I would. My son is making a mistake. Maybe. But it's his mistake to make. Cece opened the car door. I'm sorry you almost died, Mrs. Ashford. I'm sorry someone hurt you. But it wasn't me. And I'm not leaving until we prove it. She stepped out of the car and Eleanor called after her. You'll regret this, Ms. Monroe. When everything falls apart, and it will, you'll wish you'd taken my offer. The car drove away, leaving Cece standing at the gate, shaking. Maybe Eleanor was right. Maybe Cece was drowning, pulling Van down with her. But for the first time in 6 months, she wasn't drowning alone. And that had to count for something. Van found her an hour later, sitting on the guest house porch, staring at nothing. My mother came to see you. It wasn't a question. How did you know? Cece asked. Because I know her. And I know she's terrified I'm making a mistake. Van sat beside Cece, close enough that their shoulders touched. What did she say? That I'm using you. That you're trying to save me because you couldn't save your sister. That I'm going to destroy your life. Cece turned to him. Is she right? About which part? Any of it. All of it. Cece's voice cracked. Are you helping me because of me? Or because I represent your sister? Another chance to get it right? Van was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was raw. Honest. At first? Maybe. At first I saw you as a puzzle to solve. A wrong to right. Another way to control an outcome. He met her eyes. But that's not what this is anymore. Then what is it? It's you making burned grilled cheese for Lily and calling it dinner. It's you sitting with Ray through his confusion and never losing patience. It's you going back to that hospital every night, facing people who hate you, because you took an oath to protect others. Van's hand found hers. You're not a project, Cece. You're not my sister's ghost. You're just you. And you're remarkable. Cece felt something crack open in her chest. Hope maybe. Or fear. They felt the same lately. Your mother offered me money to leave, Cece admitted. Van's expression darkened. How much? Enough to start over. Enough to give Lily everything she deserves. And you didn't take it. No. Why not? Because I'm falling for you, Cece thought. Because when I'm with you, I remember what it feels like to be more than my worst day. Because you make me believe I'm worth saving. But those words were too big. Too terrifying. So instead she said, because I made you a promise. And I keep my promises. Van pulled her close and Cece let herself lean into him. Let herself imagine this could last beyond the investigation, beyond Dr. Cross, beyond all the chaos. She's going to keep trying to separate us, Van said quietly. My mother. She's scared and she's being manipulated, but she's also stubborn as hell. Wonder where you get it from. Van laughed softly. Yeah. They sat there as the sun set, Lily's laughter drifting from inside the house, Ray humming an old song in the garden. And Cece realized something. She wasn't holding everything together by a thread anymore. She had help. She had Van. Have you ever felt like you weren't good enough for someone? Like no matter what you did, you'd never measure up to their world, their family, their expectations? That's what Cece felt sitting on that porch. And if you've ever felt that way, like you're one mistake away from losing everything, then you know how much courage it takes to stay. To fight. To believe you deserve happiness despite what everyone says. Drop a comment if this hurts to watch. Because it's about to get worse before it gets better. Cece stood outside the Ashford mansion, her heart hammering against her ribs. She shouldn't be here. Van had explicitly asked her not to confront his mother alone. But she was tired of hiding. Tired of letting other people fight her battles. If Eleanor Ashford was going to hate her, Cece wanted to face that hatred head-on. Wanted one chance to make Van's mother understand. The butler answered her knock with barely concealed disdain. Ms. Monroe. Mrs. Ashford is not receiving visitors. Tell her I'm here anyway. Cece's voice was steadier than she felt. Tell her I'm not leaving until she talks to me. 5 minutes later, Cece was led to Eleanor's private sitting room. The woman sat in a high-backed chair like a queen on a throne, still pale from her hospitalization but radiating cold authority. You have nerve, I'll give you that. Eleanor gestured to the chair across from her. Sit. Let's get this over with. Cece sat, folding her hands in her lap to keep them from shaking. Mrs. Ashford, I know what you think of me. I know what you've been told. But I need you to hear the truth. The truth? Eleanor's laugh was bitter. The truth is you almost killed me. The truth is you're a disgraced nurse who destroyed a patient through negligence. The truth is you've manipulated my son. I wasn't even your nurse. Cece's voice cracked. I wasn't working that night. I lost my license 6 months before you were hospitalized. Someone is lying to you and I think we both know who. Dr. Cross has been nothing but professional. Dr. Cross has been framing people for her crimes for years. Cece leaned forward, desperate to make Eleanor understand. She's running a black market drug operation out of St. Mercy. She uses patients as test subjects. She falsifies records and destroys anyone who gets close to discovering the truth. And I should believe you? A disgraced nurse with everything to gain from shifting blame. Eleanor's eyes were hard. Unforgiving. You're not the victim here, Ms. Monroe. I am. I'm the one who nearly died. I know. Cece felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not yet. I know you almost died. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that happened to you. But it wasn't me. Then who? Who would want to hurt me? Someone who saw you as collateral damage. Someone who's so deep into her criminal operation that one more victim doesn't matter. Cece's voice dropped. Someone who's been getting away with it because people like me are easy to blame. We're already ruined. Already voiceless. Who's going to believe a disgraced nurse over a respected doctor? Eleanor was silent, studying Cece with an expression that was impossible to read. I dedicated my life to saving people, Cece continued, and now the tears did come, hot and angry and unstoppable. I took an oath. I promised to do no harm, to protect the vulnerable, to seek truth no matter what. And one lie destroyed everything. My career. My reputation. My ability to provide for my daughter. Cece's voice broke completely. I lost everything because someone needed a scapegoat. And you know what the worst part is? Not the poverty. Not the 3 jobs or the public humiliation. The worst part is knowing that while I'm mopping floors, while I'm being treated like a criminal, someone is still out there hurting patients. Still using my destroyed life as cover. She stood, unable to sit still any longer. So no, Mrs. Ashford, I don't expect you to believe me. No one ever believes me. But I wanted you to know that your son? He's the only person in 6 months who's looked at me and seen a human being. Not a scandal. Not a cautionary tale. Just a person worth listening to. Cece walked toward the door then stopped. Turn back. Van loves you very much. And I would never ask him to choose between us. So if me being in his life causes you pain, I'll leave. Not because you offered me money. Not because I'm scared. But because he deserves a family that's whole. Cece's voice was soft now. Final. I just wanted you to know the truth first. What you do with it is up to you. She left before Eleanor could respond. And in the sitting room, Eleanor Ashford sat very still, seeing, for the first time, the raw, genuine anguish in Cece Monroe's eyes. The kind of pain that couldn't be faked. Eleanor sat alone for a long time after Cece left, her mind churning. She'd been so certain. So convinced that Cece was a manipulator, a liar, a threat to her son. But that breakdown hadn't been manipulation. It had been real. Eleanor had spent 65 years reading people, navigating society, managing her husband's business relationships, raising a son in the cutthroat world of billionaire families. She knew how to spot a liar. And Cece Monroe, with her tear-streaked face and broken voice, had been telling the truth. Eleanor stood, her body still weak but her mind sharp, and walked to her office. She pulled out the file folder from her hospitalization. Medical records. Medication logs. Incident reports. She'd been over them dozens of times, but she'd been looking for evidence of Cece's guilt. Now she looked with different eyes, searching for what she'd missed. There. Medication administration log from the night she'd coded. Dr. V. Cross had personally administered Eleanor's evening sedative. Unusual. Pharmacy supervisors didn't typically handle direct patient care unless there was a specific concern. Eleanor flipped through more pages. Found her nurse's notes from that evening. Everything seemed standard until Eleanor frowned. There was a gap. A 30-minute window where no nurse had documented checking on her. And that gap coincided exactly with when Dr. Cross had been in her room. Eleanor had been unconscious. Heavily sedated. She had no memory of those 30 minutes. What had happened while she was under? Her hands shaking slightly, Eleanor picked up her phone and called her son. Mother? Van sounded wary. Is everything? I need you to investigate Dr. Cross. Eleanor's voice was firm. Everything you have on her. Everything Cece found. I want to see it all. Silence on the other end. Then, what changed? Cece came to see me. We talked. Eleanor closed her eyes. And I think I've been wrong. About everything. Van and Cece sat in his office. Medical records and evidence spread across every surface. Eleanor had been poring over documents for 3 hours, her expression growing darker with each page. She drugged me, Eleanor said finally, her voice hollow. Cross. She came into my room that night, told the nurse she needed to administer medication personally because of a potential interaction concern. Then she injected me with something that caused respiratory depression. Why? Cece asked gently. Why would she target you specifically? I don't think she did. I think I was just convenient. Eleanor looked up, meeting Cece's eyes. I'd been asking questions about medication costs. My charity foundation funds a free clinic, and we'd noticed price discrepancies in drug orders from St. Mercy's Pharmacy. I mentioned it to the hospital board the day before my surgery. Van's expression hardened. You were getting too close to her operation. So she silenced me. Made it look like a medical error. Eleanor's hands trembled as she set down the files. And when that didn't work, when I survived, she blamed Cece. Made sure everyone was looking at the disgraced nurse instead of the respected doctor. We have everything now, Van said, pulling up files on his laptop. The black market ledger. The falsified records. Natasha's testimony about being forced to frame Cece. And now your medical records showing Cross's direct involvement. Is it enough? Cece asked. It's enough to start. But we need Natasha to officially testify. To give a statement to the FBI. Van looked at Cece. Do you think she will? Cece thought of her former best friend. Scare. Trap. Protecting her daughter the only way she knew how. I'll talk to her, Cece said. One more time. Cece found Natasha in the hospital parking garage after her shift, exactly where she knew she'd be. Some habits never changed. Nat. Cece approached slowly, hands visible, non-threatening. Please. Just hear me out. Natasha's face was drawn, exhausted. She looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. Cece, I can't. I know. I know Cross threatened Mia. I know you're terrified. Cece stopped a few feet away. But it's over, Nat. We have evidence. Ledgers. Records. Eleanor Ashford's testimony. The FBI is getting involved. Cross is going down whether you testify or not. Then why do you need me? Because without your testimony about how she forced you to falsify records, my name doesn't get cleared. Not completely. Ceci's voice was soft. Honest. And I need that, Nat. I need people to know I didn't kill that patient. That I'm not a murderer. Natasha's eyes filled with tears. She said she'd take Mia. Said she'd make sure I lost custody. Tell the court I'm an unfit mother. Then we protect each other's children together. Cece stepped closer. The FBI will offer you protection. Van has the best lawyers in the country. They'll make sure your custody battle is sealed from Cross's interference. You don't have to fight alone anymore. I'm so sorry. Natasha's voice broke. I should have stood by you. Should have spoken up when it happened. I was just so scared. I know. Cece pulled her into a hug. I know. And I forgive you. But I need you now, Nat. I need you to be brave. Just once. Just long enough to tell the truth. Natasha pulled back, wiping her eyes. Took a deep breath. Okay, she whispered. Okay. I'll testify. 24 hours later, the Ashford estate felt like the site of a very small, very significant revolution. Van's study was command central. FBI agents in suits, lawyers with briefcases, Natasha giving her official statement on camera. Eleanor had testified via video deposition, her voice steady and certain as she described Dr. Cross's suspicious behavior. The raid on Cross's office and home was scheduled for the next morning. Search warrant signed. Arrest warrant prepared. They'd won. By evening, when the FBI agents finally left, the estate felt like it could breathe again. Gerald insisted on celebrating. He ordered enough food for an army, opened champagne from his private collection, and gathered everyone in the main house's grand dining room. Cece, Van, Lily, Ray, Eleanor, Gerald, and Natasha. A strange, beautiful collection of people who'd been brought together by trauma and had chosen to become family. To truth, Gerald raised his glass. And to the courage it takes to fight for it. They drank. They ate. Lily showed Eleanor her drawings. Ray, lucid tonight, told stories about his firefighting days. Natasha and Cece laughed about nursing school, the friendship slowly mending. And Eleanor, who'd spent weeks hating Cece, now watched her with something close to admiration. You were right, Eleanor said quietly when they found themselves alone in the kitchen. About everything. I'm sorry I didn't believe you. You were protecting your son. I understand that. Cece meant it. She'd have done the same for Lily. Still, I was cruel. And wrong. Eleanor took Cece's hand. Thank you for not giving up. On the investigation. On Donovan. On yourself. Cece felt tears threaten again, but these were good tears. Healing tears. Later, after Lily had been put to bed and the others had drifted off to various corners of the house, Cece found Van standing on the terrace, looking out over the grounds. She moved beside him and he immediately pulled her close. We did it, she said softly. You did it. I just helped. Van turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. You were right about everything. Cross. The conspiracy. The truth. If I'd listened to you from the beginning, then we wouldn't be here. Right here. Right now. Cece reached up, touching his face. Everything happened exactly as it needed to. Van kissed her then. Not the desperate, adrenaline-fueled kiss in the supply closet. This was different. Slower. Deeper. Full of promise and possibility and the beginning of something real. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Van rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he said. Simple. Certain. I know it's fast. I know it's complicated. But I love you, Cece Monroe. And I don't want to wait to tell you. Cece's heart felt too big for her chest. I love you too. They stood there under the stars holding each other and let themselves believe, truly believe, that everything was going to be okay. Tomorrow Cross would be arrested. Tomorrow the truth would come out. Tomorrow Cece's nightmare would finally end. Tonight they had each other. And that was enough. The alarm system woke Van at 3 a.m. He jerked upright in bed, heart pounding. The security panel on his nightstand flashed red. Breach. Guest house. Van was running before his mind fully processed what was happening. Down the stairs, across the lawn, the grass cold and wet under his bare feet. Please. Please let them be okay. Please. He burst through the guest house door. And stopped cold. Dr. Vivian Cross stood in Cece's bedroom doorway, perfectly calm despite the blaring alarm. She wore black like she'd planned this. Like she'd known exactly what she was doing. Mr. Ashford. Cross smiled. Right on time. Van's blood turned to ice. Behind Cross in the bedroom he could hear struggling. Muffled sounds. Cece, what did you do? Van's voice was deadly quiet. What I had to. Cross moved aside and Van saw Cece on the bed, thrashing. A cloth pressed over her face, her hands clawing at it desperately. I can't breathe. Cece's voice was strangled, panicked. I can't. Van moved. He didn't think, didn't plan. Just launched himself at Cross, shoving her aside hard enough that she slammed into the wall. Then he was at Cece's side, ripping the cloth away from her face, pulling her into his arms as she gasped for air. I've got you. I've got you. Breathe, Cece. Just breathe. Cece coughed, chest heaving, tears streaming down her face. But she was breathing. She was alive. Van looked up to find Cross blocking the doorway, a syringe now in her hand. Her calm facade was cracking, desperation showing through the cracks. You couldn't leave it alone, Cross said. Either of you. I gave you chances. I warned you. But you kept digging. You drugged her. Van stood slowly, putting himself between Cross and Cece. With chloroform. The same thing you used on my mother. Chloroform is so wonderfully untraceable. And Cece has such a convenient history of instability. Cross's smile was manic now. A disgraced nurse, living in her ex-lover's guest house, overwhelmed by her circumstances. A suicide attempt. Tragic but understandable. The FBI has your ledgers, Van said. Your records. Witnesses. It's over, Cross. You've already lost. Then I have nothing left to lose, do I? Cross raised the syringe. This is pure morphine. Enough to stop her heart in under a minute. Back away, Mr. Ashford. Or I will inject her right now. Van's hands clenched into fists. He was strong but not fast enough to reach Cross before she could use that syringe on Cece. You're not touching her. Then you'll watch her die. Your choice. Cross took a step toward the bed. A voice came from the hallway. Confused. Uncertain. Cece? Ray shuffled into the doorway, his weathered face creased with confusion. He wore his pajamas, held his old baseball bat, the one he kept by his bed from his firefighting days. Grandpa, no, Cece tried to warn him, but her voice was still raspy. Wick. Cross barely glanced at the old man. Get out. This doesn't concern. Ray swung. The baseball bat connected with Cross's shoulder, knocking her off balance. The syringe fell from her hand, rolling across the floor. For a moment, just one crystalline moment, Ray's eyes were clear, focused. The dementia lifted like fog burning off in sunlight. Nobody hurts my grandbaby, Ray said. Then Cross crumpled to the floor, unconscious. The cloth fell from Cece's bed, landing beside Cross's body. Van moved to it immediately, picking it up carefully by the edge, bringing it to his nose. The chemical smell was unmistakable. Strong. Wrong. Cece watched him, still shaking, one hand pressed to her throat. What is that? Van's face went cold. He looked at Cross's unconscious form, then at the cloth in his hands, then at Cece with an expression of pure horror. The same chemical signature from my mother's attack. Van's voice was hollow. She's been doing this for years. Using chloroform to subdue patients before administering the drugs. Testing dosages. Covering her tracks. Cece's heart stopped. Not from fear. From realization. Oh my God. Cece stood on shaking legs, moved to Van's side, stared down at the woman who destroyed her life. How many people? How many victims? Van pulled out his phone with shaking hands, already dialing. We'll find them all. I promise. Every single person she hurt. We'll make sure they know the truth. Police sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. The security company had automatically alerted them when the alarm went off. Ray lowered his baseball bat, looking confused again. Did something happen? Cece pulled her father into a tight hug, tears streaming down her face. You saved me, Dad. You saved me. Van made his call, his free arm wrapped around Cece's shoulders, holding her steady. And on the floor, Dr. Vivian Cross lay unconscious, her empire of lies finally crumbling around her. The cloth, soaked in chloroform used on countless victims, lay beside her like evidence of every life she tried to destroy, including Cece's. Can you even imagine discovering something this dark? Realizing that one person's greed hurt so many innocent people? Comment your reaction. Tell me you're feeling this too. Because Cece felt it. The horror. The relief. The devastating weight of knowing how close she came to being just another victim. The arrest happened at dawn. FBI agents swarmed Dr. Cross as she regained consciousness, reading her rights while photographers from every major news outlet captured the moment. By noon it was everywhere. Every channel. Every website. Prominent physician arrested for medical fraud ring. Dr. Vivian Cross charged with attempted murder, drug trafficking. Years-long conspiracy at St. Mercy Hospital exposed. And buried in the third paragraph of every article, former nurse Celeste Monroe, previously convicted of negligence, has been fully exonerated. Sources close to the investigation say Monroe was instrumental in exposing Cross's criminal operation. Cece sat in Van's study, watching the news coverage with a strange sense of disconnection. It was over. After 6 months of hell, it was finally over. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing. Old colleagues apologizing. Media requesting interviews. The hospital board's lawyer, stammering about how they'd always believed in her integrity. Liars. All of them. But Cece couldn't find it in herself to be angry anymore. She was too exhausted. Too relieved. The hospital board issued a formal apology, Van said, reading from his tablet. They're offering full reinstatement of your license. Back pay for the months you were suspended. And a settlement for wrongful termination. How much? Cece asked numbly. Van told her. Cece laughed. It was either laugh or cry, and she'd done enough crying. That's more money than I've made in my entire life. It's not enough. Not for what they put you through. Van sat beside her, taking her hand. I'm buying St. Mercy. You're what? Buying the hospital. The board is eager to sell. Scandal like this destroys property values. I'll reform it completely. New management. New oversight. Actually ethical practices. Van met her eyes. And I want you to be the head nurse. Help me rebuild it into what it should have been all along. Cece stared at him. Van, I can't. You can. You're the best nurse I've ever seen. Even when you were mopping floors, you never stopped caring about patients. Never stopped fighting for the truth. Van squeezed her hand. Help me fix this place. Please. Cece thought about it. About walking those corridors again, not as a janitor but as a nurse. About reclaiming the career that had been stolen from her. About turning her worst nightmare into her greatest triumph. Okay, she said softly. Okay. The license reinstatement hearing was a formality. Van testified on Cece's behalf. So did Eleanor, her voice ringing through the chamber as she described Cross's crimes and Cece's courage. Natasha testified too, her friendship with Cece publicly restored. The board voted unanimously. Celeste Monroe, RN, was officially cleared of all charges and reinstated with full privileges. That afternoon, Cece put on scrubs for the first time in 6 months. She looked at herself in the mirror, really looked, and barely recognized the woman staring back. The same face, but different eyes. Harder, wiser, stronger. She'd been broken. And she put herself back together. Van found her in her new office at the hospital, head nurse just like he'd promised. The nameplate on her door still felt surreal. How does it feel? He asked. Like coming home. Cece turned to face him. Like I can finally breathe again. Good. Because I have something to show you. Van led her through the hospital corridors. Cece noticed the changes immediately. Fresh paint, new equipment, staff members who smiled instead of whispered. They ended up in the ICU. The same place Cece had worked for 5 years before everything fell apart. Natasha was there, back in scrubs, reviewing charts. She looked up when they entered, and her smile was genuine. Real. Welcome back, head nurse Monroe, Natasha said. Welcome back yourself. Cece hugged her. The friendship wasn't fully healed yet. Trust took time to rebuild, but they were trying. And that was enough. Cece spent the afternoon reorienting herself. Learning the new systems. Meeting the staff. Remembering what it felt like to be valuable. To be trusted. To matter. That evening, Van took her to visit Ray in his new memory care facility, the best in the state, with gardens and art therapy and staff who treated residents with genuine kindness. Ray was painting. His hands shook, his strokes were uncertain, but he was smiling. Dad. Cece sat beside him. Ray looked at her with cloudy eyes. For a moment she thought he wouldn't recognize her. Then, Cece. My girl. You look happy. I am happy, Dad. Good. That's good. Ray went back to his painting. You deserve happiness. After everything. Cece kissed his forehead, blinking back tears. Lily was thriving too. She'd started calling Van Uncle Van, much to his delight. The trauma of her hospital scare had faded, replaced by the resilience of childhood and the security of knowing her mother was finally okay. Everything was falling into place. And 6 months later, at the Ashford Foundation Charity Gala, Cece stood on a stage in a dress that cost more than her old car, looking out at hundreds of faces. Van had asked her to give a speech. About courage. About fighting for truth. About surviving. I learned something in these past months, Cece began, her voice steady. I learned that truth is worth fighting for. Even when everyone tells you to stay quiet. Even when speaking up costs you everything. She scanned the crowd. Saw Eleanor smiling encouragement. Natasha dabbing at her eyes. Gerald beaming like a proud father. And Van watching her with such love that it made her breath catch. I learned that being voiceless doesn't mean you have nothing to say. It just means you have to shout louder. Cece's voice grew stronger. I learned that justice isn't something that's given, it's something you take. By refusing to disappear. By refusing to accept lies as truth. The crowd was silent, listening. And I learned that you don't have to fight alone. That sometimes the people who seem like enemies become allies. That family isn't just blood, it's the people who stand beside you when the world tries to push you down. Cece looked directly at Van. It's the people who believe in you when you've forgotten how to believe in yourself. The applause was deafening. When Cece stepped off the stage, Van was there. He pulled her into his arms, kissed her forehead. I'm so proud of you, he whispered. I couldn't have done it without you. Yes, Van said firmly. You could have. You're the strongest person I know. Then he pulled back, reached into his pocket and dropped to one knee. The entire ballroom gasped. Celeste Monroe. Van opened a ring box, revealing a diamond that caught the light and threw rainbows. You've taught me that control is an illusion. That the only thing we can truly control is how we show up for the people we love. And I want to show up for you. Every day. For the rest of my life. Cece's hands flew to her mouth, tears streaming. Will you marry me? Van asked. Yes. Cece didn't hesitate. Yes. 1,000 times yes. Van slid the ring onto her finger, stood, pulled her into a kiss that made the crowd erupt in cheers. Lily ran up, throwing her arms around both of them. Does this mean Uncle Van is going to be my dad? Van laughed, scooping Lily up. If that's okay with you. It's very okay. Lily kissed his cheek. I always wanted a dad. Eleanor and Gerald joined them, forming a circle of family. Real family. The kind built on choice and love rather than obligation. And Cece, who'd spent 6 months feeling voiceless and invisible, let herself be seen. Let herself be loved. Let herself finally come home. 2 weeks later, Cece walked into her new office at St. Mercy Hospital, now Ashford Medical Center, for her first official day as head nurse. The office was perfect, organized, professional. A window overlooking the healing garden Van had commissioned. But what drew Cece's attention was the drawer in her desk. She opened it slowly, carefully, and pulled out the frame she'd placed there yesterday. Her original nursing oath. The one she'd taken 10 years ago, fresh out of school, believing she could change the world. The paper was yellowed now. But the words were still clear. Cece read them aloud, her voice soft but certain. I will do no harm. I will protect the vulnerable. I will seek truth even when it's difficult. I will advocate for those who cannot advocate for themselves. I will treat every patient with dignity and respect. I will never stop fighting for what's right. A promise made. A promise kept. Even when keeping it nearly destroyed her. Cece set the frame on her desk, beside a photo that made her smile every time she saw it. Her and Van on the night of the proposal. Lily between them, grinning. Ray painting in the background. Eleanor and Gerald on either side, beaming. Natasha and Scrubs, arm around Cece's shoulders. Family. Some people spend their whole lives wondering if they matter, Cece thought, touching the photo frame. If their voice counts. If their truth is worth fighting for. The answer is yes. Always yes. Your voice matters. Your truth matters. You matter. Even when the world tries to tell you otherwise. Especially then. Cece stood, smoothed her scrubs and walked out of her office toward the ICU. Confident. Healed. Home. She had patients to care for. People to protect. A purpose to fulfill. And for the first time in 6 months, Cece Monroe felt like herself again. Not broken. Not damaged. Oh. The screen fades to black, then text appears. Based on the resilience of those who never stop fighting. A final voiceover, gentle but firm. Cece's story isn't over. None of our stories are. Every day people face impossible odds. They lose everything. They're told they're worthless, that their truth doesn't matter, that they should just stay quiet and accept their fate. But some people refuse. Some people keep fighting even when logic says they should give up. Some people believe, really believe, that truth is worth the cost. What would you have done in Cece's place? Would you have fought? Or would you have disappeared? Drop a comment with your honest reaction. Did you cry? Did you cheer? Did you feel every moment of Cece's journey? I want to hear from you. I need to hear from you. Because your story matters too. If you believe in stories of survival and truth, if you believe that one person can make a difference even when the entire world says they can't, then subscribe. Because there are so many more stories like Cece's that need to be told. Stories of people who refused to be silenced, who fought for justice when no one else would, who proved that being voiceless doesn't mean you have nothing to say. And if you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever been blamed for something you didn't do, if you've ever wondered whether your truth is worth fighting for, remember Cece. Remember that she lost everything and built herself back up. Remember that she was called a murderer and became a hero. Remember that she was told to stay quiet and instead she shouted, "Your truth matters. Your voice matters. You matter. Now go fight for it." Final frame appears. Thank you for being part of this journey. See you in the next story.